Hello and welcome to Roundhouse Crosstalk, a podcast hosted by the California State Railroad Museum. And for this episode, we're going to be sitting down with LaDonna DiCamillo, who was appointed the Southern California Regional Director for the California High-Speed Rail Authority by Governor Gavin Newsom in 2020. We're very excited to be talking to LaDonna today. She has over 30 years of experience in working for the railroad prior to coming to high-speed rail at the BNSF Railway, most recently as the Regional Assistant Vice President for Governmental Affairs. So this is somebody with lots and lots of railroad experience outside of high-speed rail that is now working on this project, so that's very exciting. LaDonna also holds a Bachelor's of Science degree in chemistry and a minor in physics from Washburn University, later obtaining a JD in law from the University of La Verne, and holds many honors, including the Peter Drucker Award for Excellence in Supply Chain and Logistics in 2018, as well as the BNSF Railway Employee of the Year in 2013. So this is somebody with lots of experience outside of high-speed rail, who's using that experience now to coordinate with agency partners such as Caltrans, LA Metro, Metrolink, as well as local rail and transportation partners across the 6 Southern California counties that this railroad will pass through. So LaDonna is the perfect person to be talking to us here today about all things high-speed rail. So without further ado, let's jump into the program. All right, hello everybody and welcome to Roundhouse Crosstalk, a podcast hosted by the California State Railroad Museum. Today we're sitting here with LaDonna DiCamillo, who is the Southern California Regional Director at the High-Speed Rail Authority, who's here today to talk to us about the high-speed rail project in California. As I understand, the only, or first I should say, high-speed rail project in the United States. So thank you for coming on.
Hi, Jake. Thanks for having me. Always happy to talk about what's happening at high-speed rail. We've got a lot of exciting things going on. Looking forward to talking about it today.
So the High-Speed Rail Authority is sort of divided right now into 3 sections, it sounds like, 3 phases, I should say, of construction. Sounds like we're currently getting some construction done in the Central Valley portion of it. Does that sound correct?
Well, how about if I start at the top?
Mm-hmm.
For your listeners and explain what's happening at the High-Speed Rail Authority, and we'll go from there. We were actually officially initiated by the voters in 2008 with Proposition 1A, which set aside approximately $10 billion for us to start work. And with that ballot measure, it was specified that we connect San Francisco with Los Angeles, Anaheim via the Central Valley. And so since 2008, we've been really defining the route and the project. It's about 500 miles, and the trip time will be less than 3 hours. We're targeting 2 hours and 40 minutes, which is really exciting. It's an ability to keep ridership high and make that time. And we're divided into 3 regions. Northern California, Central Valley, and I'm the regional director for the Southern California region. And each one of those regions is divided into sections also. So I have 4 project sections, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then the sections that were in the Central Valley for environmental purposes are now construction packages. So we can kind of talk about how that works. But those sections are kind of bite-sized chunks. I like to think of them as like parts of the route that really make it a little easier for us to digest. So that's kind of how we're structured, with 3 major regions and then into project sections as well.
So it sounds like the construction is starting then in the Central Valley. And we're so can you talk a little bit about what exactly is going on?
Absolutely. Yeah. We've started construction in the Central Valley. If anybody's driven on the 99, you've probably seen what's happening and wondered what all that was. And so we are working on 119 miles of construction in that Central Valley. It was the first area where we had completed environmental, and we partnered with the federal government and got a grant to start our construction there because of it's an economic development, basically, because Central Valley needed some economic development and as well as some air quality advantages. So we started our construction there. We've invested about $6 billion in the Central Valley so far. And that construction is 119 miles. We've also started advanced design on kind of the ends, connecting Bakersfield with Merced. So design and construction on 171 miles. And we're really focused in on completing that 71 miles so that we can put an operating track in place, show Californians that it actually works. So we're really excited about that and focused on finishing the construction that's underway. Then we'll have track and system. So the construction is really about the concrete, and we'll be putting track and signals and catenary on in the next phase and getting that test track running, aiming for 2033 to have a system on that 171 miles that's going to operate between Bakersfield and Merced.
And something that I read about in preparation for this is that sort of the goal is to go where the people are. That I thought was really interesting. So instead of Highway 5, where there's a bunch of farmland, maybe not all that many people in big cities, instead focusing on connecting people even within that region. Can you talk a little bit about the decision to do that rather than just go along the 5, I guess?
Absolutely. We want to serve all of California, and as many riders as we can. That is one of our goals. And we're estimating we'll eliminate over 400,000 trips of car trips per year once we're up and running. But we want to connect communities. And we have a team that really focuses in on station planning. And it was new to me. It's kind of exciting, an opportunity to vision what a station area would look like and work with the local community to develop small business opportunities, transit-oriented development, and to really build a vision in and around the station areas. In fact, we recently just got a federal grant. It's called a RAISE grant. Don't ask me what the acronym stands for, but it's RAISE grant of $20 million for the Fresno area and to focus it on the station preservation of the historic depot there. And our team has been working really hard with Fresno on just that purpose, to build a station that makes sense for that community and will ultimately facilitate more ridership for us as well.
And I think you mentioned it a little bit when we were talking about sort of using the money from a federal grant for the Central Valley. But can you talk a little bit about why exactly we decided to start in that Central Valley and what sort of benefits we see both to the Central Valley and starting there, but then also for the state?
It's really in large part an economic boost for the Central Valley. Like I said, we've invested so far about $6 billion. We've created 11,000 jobs so far. On a daily basis, we're running around, calling out around 1,100 to 1,200 workers. So we're excited about that and putting people to work in the Central Valley on the construction side of things. And it's a good place for us to do a test on high-speed rail. As you know, many other countries are doing this. Dozens of other countries have this, but it will be the first major high-speed rail in California, or in the United States, actually, but especially in California. So it's a good place to put a track in place. We'll connect Bakersfield with Merced in what will be a much faster trip than is currently by car.
So when talking to folks in preparation for this podcast, something that surprised me was that so many folks didn't know that there was current construction happening in the Central Valley. So can you talk a little bit about what sort of is being constructed and what that looks like right now? What construction is happening right at this moment?
Sure. Construction's divided, as I mentioned, divided into 4 construction packages. So there's a team working on each one of the 4 construction packages. We actually plan to have construction package 4, which is the southernmost part of the 119 miles, done in later this year, actually, and hopefully the rest are planned to follow fairly quickly by 2026. We should have the remaining construction complete, and we'll aim for starting our tracking systems in 2028. So if you're not from the Central Valley, you probably haven't seen it, but it is underway, and we are making good progress in the Central Valley on that 119 miles that's under construction.
Another thing that we had some of our listeners express sort of confusion on was exactly how the funding process worked. I know so far we've talked about different federal grants, we talked about a state bond. How does this all sort of work?
Sure. As I mentioned in 2008 with Proposition 1A, the voters set aside about $10 billion. And that was just a fraction, or wasn't a fraction, it was just a portion really of our anticipated total cost. But it was set aside for high-speed rail. And the other state funds that we get are from the cap and trade tax on fuel. Basically, a portion of that goes into the funding for our work. The rest of what we're doing is through federal grants. We've received federal grants for completion of the environmental work, which I think we'll talk a little bit more about when we get into the other project sections, as well as for the initial construction that started in the Central Valley. So right now, I think we're around 85% funded by state funds and maybe 15 federal. But as we've defined our project more and more, it makes us more competitive for grants, whether it's the continuation of the cap and trade program beyond 2030. It's really important to our CEO that we're well defined. We've completed our environmental work, and that puts us into a position where we can apply for these grants and opportunities. And then we'll just bite away in smaller bite-sized pieces. We'll work away at the funding that we ultimately need for the whole project.
So you've had a long history in the railroad. So you've worked for BNSF for 30 years and have all this experience before coming to high-speed rail. So I'm curious how this project, you mentioned it's the first major high-speed rail project in the United States. How does this differ from your time at a more traditional railroad?
Totally different. Pretty day and night. It's the private sector versus public sector. Private sector, I was working with BNSF Railway, as you mentioned, which was all freight. Decision making on the private sector side, much different. What they're looking for, what the goals are, what the process is, very different. On the state side, more protocols in place to protect the state and the taxpayers' funds. So there's more process in place. So there is a lot of difference. On the other hand, rail is thinking in railroad is kind of the same, whether you're moving freight trains or passenger trains. It's really complicated for people who don't think railroad. I like to describe it as railroads being a little bit one-dimensional. You can only go where there's track, right? Where in freeways or in roadways are more two-dimensional. Air is three-dimensional. You have a lot more flexibility. Railroad operations, particularly when we get into shared corridors, which we are here in Southern California, shared with the passenger and the freight. It's really important to think about those operations and the congestion and the interaction between the speed of the freight trains and the speed of the passenger trains. Where we're high speed, for High-Speed Rail Authority, we're going 200 miles an hour. We're in an isolated corridor. So that's kind of cool and easy. But when we get into these shared corridors, it really helps having my background on the freight side to understand those operational complexities, especially as we get into Southern California with all the freight that's happening at the port. So it's been kind of fun, and I'm thrilled to be retired from the freight side, although I'm technically too young to retire. So here I am. And it was a great opportunity for me to work on the passenger side. So this has been a lot of fun as well.
So thinking about the high-speed rail, a connection between San Francisco all the way down to LA. I know eventually the hope is to get San Diego and Sacramento in there as well. Is this designed more for commuters? Is this designed more for like vacation travel? Both? What's the sort of idea there?
I think it's a mix of both. I know when I originally heard about high-speed rail, it was thought of as more of a traveler connecting San Francisco to Anaheim, it will definitely serve the commuter as well. And it may not be a daily commuter, especially the post-COVID world where we're doing a hybrid work type of scenario. It really opens up residence areas, places where people can live and commute to work on those day or two where you want to be in the office and then you go back to virtual. So I really think it opens up that opportunity. And for the students, say for instance, somebody who's traveling just once or twice a week, great opportunity for those folks. And then I think it will be for all travelers. If I want to, we have family in the Northern California, and I swear that trip gets longer and longer by car every time I drive it, right? Be great to be able to jump on a train and relax and have it done in 3 hours. So I think it's going to be a lot of a mix of who's on it, whether there's families or, individuals, or it's going to really open up an opportunity that the state currently doesn't have.
So here at the California State Railroad Museum, we obviously focus mostly on historical railroads. And one thing that we talk about a lot, especially talking about our primary one's the Transcontinental Railroad, since we're in Sacramento. But any time we talk about 19th century railroads, one of the things that always comes up is the environmental impact of these railroads. They went up quick, but they also took down a lot of trees with them. They blasted through granite rock in the Sierra Nevadas, all these different things. But from reading over the materials for this podcast, it sounds like the High Speed Rail Authority is taking significant measures to minimize that environmental impact for this project. Can you walk our listeners a little bit through the mitigation efforts you guys are going through? I know you talked about the environmental reports. So what goes into that? What are we trying to do with those?
So that's where I primarily spend my time, is on the environmental studies. And a lot of people have criticized us for taking so long and compared us to the Transcontinental, and it's just not the same comparison. We would never do today what was done for the Transcontinental, and we now have a lot of environmental processes that I think make the project better. So what I'm doing in my territory, and we have 4 project sections where I'm over the Southern California region between Bakersfield and Anaheim, and we're divided into 4 project sections. 2 of those are environmentally complete. And actually, of our 500-mile phase 1, 422 miles is environmentally completed. But my day-to-day is studying the impacts of our operation, of our construction, talking to communities, getting that community feedback, listening to concerns of, it might be noise, it might be businesses that have to be relocated, it's homes that have to be relocated. We try to avoid that, but it happens. So really what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis is understanding those concerns, trying to figure out what we can do to respond to the concerns. And it's a process, and it takes some time. And I think, like I said, in the end, I think we end up with a better project. We've worked with the community. We've addressed concerns as we go. We've educated the community on what's happening and what our project looks like. We've made adjustments to our project along the way. We might adjust the alignment, different things that we can do to lessen that burden to the community. And we want to make sure that what we do is great for the environment. And I think we're doing a lot of things that are great for the environment, but also safe as well. So putting together a plan that can be done safely and for our workers. And I think that's really important in a distinction between previous how things have been done and what we're looking at now.
I think that community involvement's a great point too, because when you're building the Transcontinental Railroad, not to keep comparing it to that, but you're not necessarily, there wasn't community involvement in
Right.
developing that path. So that's another good benefit to this one. But jumping into more of what you do as the regional director, specifically in Southern California. So you oversee the Southern bookend partnerships, like the Los Angeles Union Station redesign, as well as grade separations. Can you explain what a bookend project is, what projects are underway, and how this is helping the project as a whole when construction is mostly happening in the Central Valley?
Our Proposition 1A funds, the first allocation of those, which was about $4.5 billion, leadership, our elected leadership, wanted to divide up how those funds were spent, because with those funds come an economic benefit. And so even though the focus of our organization has been on construction in the Central Valley, we wanted to also put some funds and investment into what we refer to as the bookends. So Northern California and Southern California. In Northern California, we've allocated some funds for Caltrain to help electrify Caltrain. And my counterpart in Northern California works with his partners at Caltrain and they're building that electrification. On the Southern California side, we set aside funds for two projects were identified, one at Union Station, which was referred to as Link US, and the other at a grade separation in Santa Fe Springs known as Rosecrans Marquardt. So let me touch a little bit on what each of those are. I'm going to start with the grade separation. It just happens to be one of the last grade crossing separations necessary on the BNSF corridor. It's their main freight corridor into the United States. And it happened to be one of the most dangerous. It's a T intersection for cars with a railroad track going diagonally through it. And it just it had a lot of incidents at that particular grade separation because of the complicated nature of the design of the crossing, it took a long time, and it was a pretty expensive grade separation to do. So we partnered with Metro, and we've set aside $77 million. That project's under construction. I think it's going to be in 2025 when it's complete. Don't hold me to that date, but we are partnered with Metro. It's under construction, and we're making great progress on that. The other bookend project for Southern California is Union Station. If you've ever taken a train into Union Station, you know those are dead-end tracks, and it makes for a very inefficient rail operation. So whatever train track you came in on, you got to go back out on. And it really congests what we refer to as the throat of Union Station. So we've worked with Metro to design, Metro owns Union Station, but we've worked with Metro to design run-through tracks. And what we would do is build over the 101 freeway. So the tracks, as you come in, you continue on straight. And then reconnect into the corridor. And so it's going to be about a 60% improvement of efficiency for passenger operations. We're really excited about that. Metro is the lead on the project. And if you tuned into our board update last month in June, they gave an update. They are a little over budget. They're very over budget. And a little behind schedule. So we're working with Metro to come up with what we refer to as a remediation plan to figure out if there's any design refinements we can do to the project, or where we can look at financial savings and what other funds we can pursue to finish that project. It's going to be important, not just for high-speed rail. The High-Speed Rail Authority out of Prop 1A put in or set aside $423 million, and the state also contributed about the same amount for the original budget, and then we're over budget. So we'll be looking for additional funds or some sort of way to close that gap and finish that project. Overall, it's going to be a big benefit for the other passenger operators. Metrolink operates there. Losan, who runs the train from San Diego to San Luis Obispo, operates through Union Station. So it won't just be a benefit for us, it'll be a benefit for all passenger carriers once we get that done.
So we talked about the bookend projects. You mentioned that a lot of what you guys are doing right now in Southern California is the environmental assessments and reports and stuff like that. Is there anything else happening in Southern California that we should know about?
Well, since it's my territory, I love talking about Southern California. So we're divided into 4 project sections. I'll start north and work my way south and kind of give you and your listeners an overview of Southern California and what we're doing in Southern California. First project section is Bakersfield to Palmdale. It's a long stretch, but that environmental document was completed in, I don't have my notes in front of me, but it was 2021. on about an 80-mile section there. We have applied for federal funds for advancing the design. So the environmental work's done. We want to advance design. It doesn't sound really exciting, but in my line of work, it is, because it really helps us define the project and helps communities plan around us and helps us preserve the right of way that we need. So we applied for a federal state partnership grant for Bakersfield to Palmdale, as well as San Jose to Merced. So the two sections that, I don't want to say bookends again, but basically would add to the 171 miles that's already under design and construction. So we've applied for that grant. We should know by the end of the year if we get that. Advancing the design is important to the communities, as I say, because grade separations, for example, a lot of communities are looking at doing grade separations. They may be on a different path than we are. They may not be planning to accommodate our future use. So we really want to make sure that the design is done in a way that accommodates us for the long term. It helps us define the projects or the properties that we need in and around our right of way. So it just really builds on the certainty in that project section. So I'm excited about the opportunity for a federal grant for advancing design Bakersfield to Palmdale. In the city of Palmdale itself, we're working with the city of Palmdale on station design and planning, like Fresno, although maybe further behind, but working to make sure that there's an interoperability element in Palmdale, for example, because Metrolink serves Palmdale. Potentially, we haven't talked about Brightline yet, but Brightline is a private sector high-speed rail provider who's really focused on Las Vegas to Rancho Cucamonga. And the High Desert Corridor would connect from Victorville into Palmdale. So there's an opportunity to connect to the Brightline operation. So that would all culminate in Palmdale. And so really looking at how to make the future of that station work is an exciting opportunity. So we're working with the city of Palmdale. We'll probably be entering into a memorandum of understanding of what the vision is for the future of that Palmdale station. That's exciting. On Palmdale to Burbank, it's our next project section. It is, from an engineering standpoint, the most complicated. It's through the Angeles Forest. It will require, our preferred alternative would be about 28 miles of tunneling. And with tunneling, I've learned a lot about tunneling, and I'm just touching the surface. But there are a lot of issues with respect to groundwater impacts, use of water, potentially for the tunnel boring machines and the type of equipment that's used. So a lot of issues on that particular project section. And that environmental document, the draft was released late last year. Our team is responding to comments. We hope to get our final environmental document out later this year. But it's an exciting project section. It turns what can be a 2-hour drive into 20 minutes. And so really opens up the opportunity for housing in the Antelope Valley and connecting into the LA Basin. So moving further south around the Burbank Airport, we do have a planned connection to the Burbank Airport. So that's exciting. People would be able to fly into the airport, directly connect to our train. Burbank to Los Angeles is the third project section, moving from north to south. And that's a 14-mile section that we completed the environmental work last year in January. So we're getting into a shared corridor. We would be sharing the Metrolink corridor for Burbank to Los Angeles. Then we come into Union Station, which is why we're so involved in the Link US project, because each one of these project sections has to connect, right? And you want it to connect smoothly. And so we'd go into Union Station, and then the last project section is Los Angeles to Anaheim. And that one, we haven't released a draft yet. It's been a fairly complicated project section from a congestion standpoint. It's just very populated urban area. Where do we go? Where do we put the track? We try to avoid any residential property takings to the extent we can. And, we're now in a very urbanized area. So we've been working with BNSF Railway on using their existing right-of-way, which is also used by Metrolink and Losan. So we're hoping to come up with a plan to utilize that right-of-way and expand it for us as well as for the other passenger carriers and preserve the freight side of things. So that's where it gets kind of complicated. We're hoping to have that draft environmental document out next year and finish the final environmental document by the end of 2025. So that's the plan for Southern California. We think we're making great progress.
Yeah, these guys sound incredibly busy, so it's a lot of work. So one thing that we've mentioned a little bit earlier is that there are several countries, I think you said 14, that have high-speed rail or thereabout. Have you guys taken any lessons that we may have learned looking at high-speed railroads in Europe or Asia?
Absolutely. And I want to say I saw that there were like 26 different countries that have high-speed rail. I haven't visited but two. I've only been to two, maybe, I guess technically three. But absolutely, we're building on what's been done elsewhere. In fact, we've hired Deutsche Bahn, who is a German company who's had experience operating high speed in Europe, and we use them as what we refer to as an early train operator. So they give us advice, and we're constantly working with them to make sure that of course, we want something that ultimately we'll be able to build on. And then last November, our CEO met with the French Consul General in San Francisco, strengthening that relationship. So absolutely, we're always looking at what others are doing elsewhere. In fact, we recently started a program where we're looking at what the interior of our trains will look like, and we're pulling on the latest technology of what riders want to see, and what will make that ride most convenient for them. So it's kind of fun being able to start envisioning what the train itself, that experience will be like. So we're working with companies, DB in particular, to vision that experience for our riders.
Well, something that we hear a lot when speaking to folks about high-speed rail, it's a project that we do mention at the museum. We often find that folks are a little bit skeptical about the timing of the project, or they're just kind of confused about sort of what's the timeline here? When should we expect to potentially have a ride available from San Francisco to LA?
From San Francisco to LA, I'm probably not going to say. And part of that is it's a process, especially on the funding side. So first we had to get the project defined, which we've done. We know our 500-mile phase one route. And like I said, 422 miles is environmentally cleared. We're finishing up those documents in Southern California. But then the next phase is funding. And so when those funds come in is a little unpredictable for us. We don't have a consistent flow of funds for the entire route. We have focused the funds that we have on the construction in the Central Valley, which really makes sense. You want to build something to a completion in a usable state. So most of our funds has gone into the Bakersfield to Merced construction project, that 171 miles, so that we can develop a project, show Californians that it works, and build on that momentum to get additional funding. As funding comes in, we look for opportunities for early start projects. It might be grade separations. I've got a lot of them in Southern California that I can break out that will be beneficial to Metrolink and other carriers for early start projects. And it just depends on which grant opportunities are going to present themselves first and how we can get the funding. But by 2033, we should have that operating segment in the Central Valley between Bakersfield and Merced to show California it works.
And then, so you mentioned a little bit about board meetings and things like that on ways to keep updated with the project. But where should people go if they're interested in kind of keeping up with the latest news?
Our team does a great job on our website. So, start with our website. There's a contact us page. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, of course. Our team is always looking for opportunities to update folks on Twitter feed. We do a business plan every 2 years. It's part of our legislative mandate is to update our business plan every 2 years, and it's in the even years typically. COVID kind of threw us off a little bit, but it's in the even years. So our next business plan will be next year. We just put out a project update report. We refer to it as a PUR. So you can go on our website and look at our project update report for 2023 and really find out what's happening at the authority. We try not to repeat ourselves too many times. So the business plan, the 2022 business plan, is also a good place to go to see. I like the 2022 business plan because it shows the interconnections of what we're working on with the other carriers and the transit. And there's a lot of fun maps in there to show how California will be connected in the future. So lots of ways to stay in touch, and I hope that your listeners will do that.
Absolutely. I know, I think I saw it on your guys' YouTube channel too. They had like a seasonal update or whatever that was really well done. So for our listeners, that's another good one and we'll throw all these links and stuff in the description of the podcast for them. But thank you so much for coming on the podcast and telling us all about the high-speed rail project.
Well, thanks for having us. Appreciate it, Jake. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Roundhouse Crosstalk, a podcast hosted by the California State Railroad Museum. And thank you to LaDonna for sitting down with us today, and thank you to the High-Speed Rail Authority for helping us learn more about this exciting project. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to leave us a review, like, and subscribe. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.